Hey everyone, welcome. I'm Rebecca Pickens. If we haven't met before, I am a certified book coach and developmental editor, and I am host of Self-Editing Essentials, a group coaching program for writers who are finished or almost finished writing their books and are ready to learn the art of self-editing. If you would like to learn more about the ways that I support writers, you can check out those links in the comments section. And while you're here, I would be so grateful if you would hit like and subscribe to my channel. It helps ensure that I can continue to deliver free content to writers, which I love to do. Okay, so every week I answer a question from someone in my writing community. This week, my question comes from a member of my group coaching program. She is writing a novel in first person point of view. And she was pretty sure that she had nailed that perspective. And then she shared the book with a couple beta readers and found that there was some question about whether or not her point of view was sticking to first person point of view, which was her goal. So just a quick review, first person point of view, of course, is when we are hearing a story unfold through the eyes of one primary character. So we hear everything through their voice, meaning we're using the I and my pronouns. And it is a fantastic technique to use if your goal is to really connect the reader with the audience and really help us walk in their shoes. And it can be tricky. It is a little bit more subtle. There's more nuance to writing first person point of view than we necessarily assume when we are thinking about using this technique. So I want to dive in and look at ways that we can think about first person point of view beyond pronouns so that you can catch those moments where your story starts to deviate from the point of view that you want to be writing in. So the first thing I want to think about is what are the core differences between first person point of view and third person point of view? Little caveat here, it can get far more nuanced than we're going to in this video. There are a lot of different ways to do third person point of view, and we're just going to talk about third person point of view in its simplest of terms for the sake of this conversation. So third person and first person are very different perspectives on a story. This distinction between the both of these point of views is far greater than just being a point of grammar. It's a shift in lens. In other words, when we are reading a story in third person point of view, we're seeing the narrator act in the role of the observer, almost a reporter. They are at a distance, at a sort of formal distance between themselves and the story. When we write in first person point of view, we are, as readers, going to experience that story as a lived experience of the character who is talking to us. We are getting to hear their immediate voice, and that brings us much closer to the story. So, the difference between these points of view is also a shift in authority. The narrator knows everything about the story in many cases. They may have an omniscience about what's happened before and after the moment that you're reading. They may know a lot about each character, or at least many of them. Whereas in a first person point of view story, everything is filtered through what that one narrator knows, whatever that first person point of view character is seeing and experiencing. That's what we, the reader, are limited to knowing. So we're changing that relationship between the narrator and the reader because in those different instances, first person point of view versus third person point of view, we have a different bunch of information that we are being given as it's filtered through these two kinds of narrators. So when we write in first person point of view, it's so important to remember that it's so much more than pronouns. For example, we have a tendency when we're writing in first person point of view and third person point of view as well, is to use filter words. Filter words are words like I saw, I thought, I noticed, and these keep us outside of the experience that the character is having. Now, of course, if we're using first person point of view, we want to bring that reader way up close to everything that's happening. So filter words then go and sort of negate the effect that we're actually aiming for here. Another pitfall is slipping into what I call author voice. Now, of course, if your character happens to be a writer or is just a very eloquent speaker who uses maybe more formalized, careful, precise language, then by all means use an author voice. But most of your characters probably fall into a range of different categories and don't necessarily speak like a formal narrator of a story. And so it's very important not to slip into that narrator's voice when what you're doing is writing first person point of view. You want to make sure if your character is a teenager, that they sound like a teenager. If they are a really casual, laid back kind of person, they're not going to use the same kind of voice that a narrator in a third person point of view book would. So that can be a place where, although you may be using first person pronouns, if you start to slip into that narrator's voice, you are slipping dangerously close to third person point of view. And that's a chance to rein back in and figure out, okay, how does my character, my first person character, speak? Make sure you use that voice. Also, narrative distance. If you are finding that your first person point of view story is feeling a little bit distant, look to see, are you using that third person reporter voice? Are you in observational mode instead of experiential mode? That can be a third person point of view in disguise. So, what do you do if you're worried that you have started to slip into the third person point of view? No worries. We've got tools to help with that. The first thing to do is super easy. You just run a pronoun check. Look for pronouns that are not in first person point of view when referring to your narrator and just eliminate them. Make the switch. The second thing is so important, and I say this as a developmental editor because I see this a lot. I will get manuscripts from writers who are writing in first person point of view with sentences like "I blushed," uh, "I became pale," "I started to fidget with my sweater," with the cuff on my sweater. These are details that a third person narrator would be very wise to include. They're interesting, they provide some subtext, but they are not the kinds of details that a first person narrator in most instances is going to be aware of. They can't see themselves blush. They don't really tune into the fact that they're fiddling with a string on their sweater cuff. These are the kinds of details a reporter would share, that a third person narrator would report on. Instead, think about what that character would realistically notice. Here's an example. In third person, she blushed when she realized what had happened. In first person, I glanced down. My dress was torn, streaked with mud. Do you see the difference? There's that immediacy. And we see what was important to your character in that moment. We are privy to knowing what she saw first. And then we can conclude how that maybe made her feel. And finally, do a voice check. Rephrase sentences to make sure they sound natural and that they don't sound like narration. So in third person, where we are going to do more reporting, more narration, the sentence might read, "She was terrified of speaking up." Now in first person, we're going to remember, we're going to get a little more voicey. We're going to imagine how your specific character would share information. "I felt like an idiot for speaking up." Now you can see that difference and you can see how they land very differently on the page. Now let's dig into tapping into inner voice. In third person point of view, emotions are stated as if they're being reported on. In first person, we are actually feeling that thought. It should sound, whatever your character says, should sound like the thought itself. So, for example, in third person point of view, it would be fine to write your sentence as, "She felt like everyone was staring at her." They're narrating that this is a feeling, that this is an emotion that the character is having. But in first person, we're much closer. We're right up there. Why is everyone staring at me? She's not going to filter this with a word like, "I feel like this is happening. I suspect this is happening." No, she is certain. Everyone is staring at me. Why? And we get a much less objective report, but we get that immediacy. We know exactly what it feels like to be that character in the moment. So when you are looking at your manuscript and looking as if you are writing in first person point of view, and you want to make sure that you are staying true to that perspective, here's a checklist you can use. It's super simple. You want to swap pronouns if anything is out of place, remove those filter words that create a distance between your character and their reader, anchor them in a lived perception. Use the character's natural thought and speech patterns and reread it aloud. Does it sound like your character is thinking these thoughts, or does it sound like someone's narrating these thoughts and emotions? This checklist will help you really fine-tune your first person point of view, and it will remind you that first person point of view is about so much more than pronouns. There is some nuance there, but this checklist will help you tackle that. So happy editing, happy writing. Keep in touch. Let me know if you have any questions about point of view. What point of view is the novel that you're writing? And I would love to hear about it in the comments section below. And please, again, subscribe. I will be back next Tuesday with more videos. Take care.